Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make this maxi shirt dress. Please keep watching and let's get started. If you are yet to subscribe to my channel, please hit the subscribe button, turn on your notification bell so that you can get notified anytime I upload a new video. This is the fabric I'll be using for the shirt dress. I have about 6 yards there. And I'll also be using lining, but lining is optional. If you don't want to put lining on your shirt dress, it is totally optional. Depending on your size, you need about 4 yards to 6 yards. This shirt dress has a waist joining, so I'm cutting out the half length first. The half length I'm cutting out is 17 inches. The full length of the dress is 60 inches, but the half length is 17 inches. And I'm starting with the front part of the half length. The front part first. So yeah, I already have the length of the half length. The length I'm using here is 17 inches, and from the shoulder line, the shoulder is the line at the top, the shoulder line to the chest line is 9 inches. Shoulder line to the half length is 17 inches. The first thing I'm doing here is to mark 1.5 inches by the side of the fabric. My fabric is on fold, so I'm marking out 1.5 inches, and that will serve as the button allowance. The next thing I'm doing here is from that line of the button allowance, I'm marking out the shoulder measurement divided by 2 plus 0.5 inch allowance. I marked it on the shoulder line and also on the chest line, and I connected with a ruler. The next thing I'm doing is to mark out the neck depth and neck width. I'm using a neck width of 3 inches and a neck depth of 3 inches, and I connected with a curve. I'm coming down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant, and I'll connect it back into the neckline. The next thing I want to do now is to mark out the bust measurement divided by 4. I'm marking out the bust measurements divided by 4. I'll mark it on the chest line. And on the waistline, I'll mark out the waist measurements divided by 4 plus 1 inch allowance for that. I'll be adding 1 inch allowance for that for this shirt dress. Note that that is also optional on this shirt dress. You can decide not to add that, but I'm adding that to mine. The next thing I'm doing now is to mark out 2 inches allowance, 2 inches same allowance, and I'll connect it with a ruler. From the shoulder slant, I'll divide what I have there by 2 and get the midpoint. From the midpoint, I'll come in by 0.5 and I'll bring my curve to connect the armhole. I'll go in with the bust span measurements divided by 2. The bust span measurement I'm working with is 10 inches. 10 inches divided by 2 is 5. I'm adding 0.5 inch allowance, that is 5.5. I'll mark it on the waistline, and also I'll get from the shoulder to the bust point. That is where the dart will start from. I'll connect those 2 points together with a ruler, and then I'll come out by ½ inch on both sides of the dart leg, and I'll connect it back to the bust point. I am adding ½ inch allowance to the bottom part. That is what we'll be using to join it to the down part of the dress. This is the back, and my fabric is on fold. The first thing I'm doing is to mark out 1.5 inches. When I'm done marking, I'll connect with a ruler, and that line will serve as the shoulder line. From the shoulder line, I'm marking out the half length. The half length is 17 inches, but I'm adding ½ inch allowance for joining to the down part of the dress. The next measurement I'll mark now is the shoulder to the chest line. The shoulder to the chest line is 9 inches. I'll mark that out and I'll connect with a ruler. I'll go in with the shoulder measurements divided by 2 plus ½ inch allowance. I'll mark it on the shoulder line and chest line, and I'll connect with a ruler. The next thing I'll be marking out now is the neck depth and the neck width. I used a neck width of 3 inches for the front, same thing I'll be using for the back, and I'll use a neck depth of 0.5 and I'll connect with my hand. The next thing I want to do now is to come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant, and I'll connect it back into the neckline. I'll mark out the bust measurements divided by 4. After marking that, I'll come back to the shoulder slant. From there, I'll divide what I have left by 2 and I'll get the midpoint, and I'll connect my armhole following that midpoint up to the bust measurement I marked out. The next thing I'll do now is to mark out the waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch allowance for that, and I'll connect with a ruler. I'm adding 2 inches allowance, same allowance I added to the front. I'm also adding 2 inches allowance to the back, and I'll also connect with a ruler. I'll go in with the bust span measurement divided by 2, and that is 5.5. I'm marking it out there, and I'll connect with a ruler. For the back, my dart will start from 1 inch below the chest line. That is where the dart will start from, and that is what I marked now. And I'll come out by 0.5 on both sides of the dart leg, and I'll connect it. The last thing I'll be doing on this back is to extend the shoulder by 1.5 inches, and that is the essence of the 1.5 inches I left at the top earlier. So I'm extending the shoulder by 1.5 inches, and I connected with a ruler. I'll cut it out now. This is the front and the back half length now, and what I want to do now to the front part is to reduce the shoulder by ½ inch. Because this is a shirt dress, I want the back to fall to the front, so I'll reduce the front shoulder by ½ inch, and that is what I am doing here. I'll cut it out. Here I'm cutting out lining for both the front and the back. I'm cutting out the exact thing I have on the fabric for the lining. Like I said earlier, lining is optional for this shirt dress. You can decide not to add lining to yours. It is totally optional, but I'm adding lining to this dress because that is what the client wants. Make sure to notch your darts on the fabric and also on the lining. This is for the down part of the dress, and this one I'm cutting out first is the back. My fabric is on fold, and the width I have here that is on fold is 29 inches. The width I have here is 29 inches on fold. The length is the full length minus the half length plus hemming allowance. That is the length I have here. So I'm using the full length of the Ankara fabric for this down part. What I'll be doing to this down part is simple. I'll take the waist measurement and add my allowance, and from that waist measurement I'll connect with a ruler straight to the down part of the dress. The only thing you need to make sure of is that the hip measurement plus allowance is intact, so that the hip measurement is not short. Mark out your hip line and take your hip measurement there. Make sure that you have your hip measurement intact plus allowance. That is what I cross-checked now, and it is fine. So the next thing I'll do now is to come to the bottom parts and come up by 1.5 inches, and I'll curve it back into the hem. That is basically what I'll be doing to the down part. I'll cut it out now. My fabric is also on fold, and this one I want to cut out is for the front. Remember that the front will have a button allowance, so I'll use the back to cut out the front. The only difference is that there will be a button allowance at the front. I am marking out 1.5 inches for the button allowance. I'll mark it all the way down, and I'll connect with a ruler. Once I'm done marking, I'll just cut it out. Here I'm cutting out lining for the down part. The lining will not get to the end of the dress. The lining will stop at 6 inches before the end of the dress. I don't want the lining to get to the end of the dress, so that is what I marked out here, and I will just cut it out. I'll do the same thing for both the front and the back. The lining will stop at 6 inches before the end of the dress. This is the front part of the dress, both the down part and the half length. What you need to do to the button allowance is to add your interfacing there on the main fabric. You don't need to add on the lining, just add your interfacing to the main fabric. So the next thing I will do now is to go over to the sewing machine and take in my darts on both the main fabric and the lining. I'll take in the darts, and after taking the darts, I will join the fabric together. I will join the upper part and the lower part together, fabric to fabric and lining to lining. That is the way I will join it. So go ahead and do yours too. Take in the darts on both the main fabric and the lining, and also join the upper part to the lower part, fabric to fabric and lining to lining. I'll go over and do that now, and I'll bring it back. After joining the upper part to the lower part, I also went ahead to join the side with the allowance I left, and I also joined at the shoulder. You can see that this is the main fabric, and I also joined the lining separately. I have gone ahead to do the same thing to the lining, and this is what we have. The next thing I'll do now is to go ahead and close the front parts. The parts where the buttonhole and the button will be, I'll go ahead and use the lining to turn it inside. I'll go over and do that, and I'll bring it back and show you. This is after I was done turning the button part with the lining. I went ahead to top stitch on the lining. So go ahead and top stitch on the lining after stitching, and this is what it is looking like. The next thing I'll do now is to measure around the neckline from the front to the back. Measure what you have there, because that is the measurement you'll be needing to cut out the collar. So I've measured mine now, and I'll go ahead and cut the collar. This is my collar still here right on the table, and it is on fold. While I was taking the measurement around the collar earlier, I measured it on fold, so whatever I'll be cutting here too will be on fold. The first thing I did here is to get a straight line on the collar stay, and after doing that, I marked out the 9.5 inches I got around the neck earlier, and from there I'll get the midpoint. I'll put a mark on the midpoint. From the end where I marked the 9.5 inches, I'll come up by 1 inch, and I'll connect it to the midpoint with a ruler. The length of this collar is 1.5 inches. The next thing I'll do now is to mark out 1.5 inches, and that is what I'm marking here. And after marking, I'll connect with a ruler. Go ahead and make a curve at the tip of the collar like I'm doing here, and that will be all for this collar. I'll cut it out now. The next thing to do is to iron the collar on the fabric. This fabric is on fold, so I'll go ahead and iron it now on the fabric. After ironing, cut out leaving a space of ½ inch round the collar. The part that will be at the bottom part on the collar, iron the ½ inch allowance you left on one side of the collar. Iron that part, then you go over to the sewing machine and secure that place down with a stitch. You run a stitch on that part you folded, and then after running a stitch on the part you folded, go ahead and run a stitch round the collar, just the way you see me marking it. Go ahead and run a stitch round the collar. I'll go over to the sewing machine and do mine, but first secure that part you folded with a stitch, then go ahead and run a stitch round the collar. I'm done running the stitch now, and I want to turn it out so that you can see what we have on the collar. I am ironing my collar so that it can lay flat and nice, so go ahead and do yours too. Iron it properly. To fix the collar to the dress now, go ahead and get the midpoint round neck of the collar. So go ahead and get the midpoint like so. Just fold the round neck into two and notch the midpoint. You do the same thing to the collar, also get the midpoint. And once you get the midpoint, you fix both midpoints together, right side facing each other. The right side facing each other, you fix the midpoint together and you run a stitch there all the way from one end of the collar to the other end. I'm pinning mine now down so that it can be easy, so you can go ahead and pin yours too. After pinning, run a stitch there, and when you are done running that stitch, you go ahead and cover the collar with the other part that is folded. With the other part that is folded, you run a stitch on that part that is folded to secure it down to close the collar, and that will be all. This is after I was done with the collar, and this is what it is looking like. You can see that it is looking neat and nice, so you can also go ahead and iron it. The next thing I'll do now is to fix the sleeves. I've prepared my sleeve already, so I just need to fix it into the armhole. And after doing that, I'll also go ahead and hem the bottom part. I'll hem the bottom part, and that will be all on this dress. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel. Please turn on your notification bell so that you can get notified anytime I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.